I'm going to be ranking every single character in the masterpiece that is Metaphor Refantazio. This tier list isn't solely based on if they're my favorite characters or not, but also how well written I feel they are. So while this video is almost entirely subjective, I will try to evaluate and analyze characters for their value and function within the narrative as well. Let's get started. Sanctifex Forden. So Forden, I feel like this is one of the characters in the narrative where maybe there just wasn't enough room for him to be properly fleshed out. He is the evil head of the Sanctus Church who basically serves as a plot device to subvert expectations on who cursed the prince, but there isn't enough room in the narrative to establish his background and motivations, so he just comes across as a one-note powermonger who is pretending to be righteous. If we got some Forden lore or a showcase on how he became the way he was, or how he rose to power in the Sanctus Church, or even just some rumors about him out in the world to build up a mystique, I think that would have helped this character a lot. As is, I'd say he's solid B tier. Basilio. So, one of those characters who's truly got that dog in him. Basilio may have less narrative relevance than the other members of your squad, but he absolutely shines with what the game gives him. His relationship with his brother showcases his most important traits. Through their conversations, you can see that he's fiercely loyal, but at the same time, he's not a blind zealot. He thinks for himself, and at his core, he just wants a fair world. His most admirable trait, though, is his willingness to take accountability and course correct. Plus, in a game with universally exceptional voice acting, Basilio stands out. A tier. So Batlin the Crier. He's an interesting fellow who serves as an insight into the internal culture of the Sanctus Church, especially when he shares anecdotes about his father, who was a crier before him. Of course, his father was a brave man of integrity who spoke truths and called out corruption when he saw it. He inevitably called out the Crown Theocracy for their unlawful igniter experiments on the Parabus test subjects, and the church condemned Batlin's father as a liar, and this situation led to his death. This, in large part, created Batlin, an almost apathetic jokester who just clock in for the church and do his job. I think it was dope to see how the protagonist gave him hope throughout the story and emboldened him to action. It's cool that by the end of the game he was blatantly and openly supporting you for the throne. Honestly, I'm thinking A tier, mainly because I think they did an exceptionally well job to give him so many layers in character development, in spite of how little the focus was on him as a character. Really efficient work. Okay, so Edeni. I like Edeni a lot. I love his relationship with his baby sister Eupha and how he stepped up to the plate after their parents died. I think you could argue that he was the most brave entrant into the tournament for the throne, as he was leaving his home of Etoreika to go to a strange land with strange people and promote religious freedom. That takes a lot of balls, not just to leave your homeland, but also to basically run an anti-establishment campaign in the land of the establishment. I also love that his love for his sister drives him in everything, including his defiance of traditions that goes back centuries. Like I said, he's a brave dude. I'd say A tier. Brigitta. Okay, so I love Brigitta a lot. I enjoyed how her story showcased the corruption of the Sanctus Church, both through how she came to be this way as a person and also the things that happened to her in her social link. I like how they tried to convey that your relationship with her didn't change her into a whole new person, but it allowed her to instead return to being who she was meant to be before the world taught her to take rather than be taken from. Dope character design as well. What are we calling this? One of the first Atlas Black characters technically? It's great to see. Say S tier. Fabienne. So honestly, I feel like there's not much going on with Fabienne character-wise, outside of her function as a caring inn owner who takes care of people and provides a safe space. I can't recall any discernible character traits that pop or add interest. Even her relationship with Grius isn't really fleshed out that much, in spite of the allusions to it. I don't know. I like her, but she comes across as flat in one note. Say C tier. Fidelio. So I know a lot of people love him, but he didn't really hit for me. He's portrayed as this extremely smart fellow, yet in spite of the evidence in front of his eyes and his brother's appeals, he doesn't choose to change his path and support you and Lady Juna, who he supposedly loves. Instead, he just takes a passenger seat and idly lets things play out. He doesn't tell Luis about the lands, but he also doesn't support you. By the time he chooses to act, it's the moment that he dies. One could say maybe this is more so an indicator of his lacking bravery and less so an indicator of his intelligence. And one could also argue that maybe in a misguided way he thought staying neutral / pseudo-Luis aligned was what he deemed the best way to protect his little brother. Regardless, the dichotomy between his stated intelligence and his actions was frustrating. I'm also not personally huge on tsundere characters, which I feel Dell basically was. It might be controversial, but bro is C tier to me. Gallica. So I want to love Gallica because she's less annoying than Mona in Persona 5, which I know is a low bar, but If I look at Gallica in a vacuum, nothing she said or did moved me emotionally in this story, which isn't great. I just feel like her character didn't have a lot going on. Like, truly, I feel her character can be summed up with, she's your fairy guide and she's not afraid to speak her mind. One sentence more or less summing up a character isn't good in my estimation. I like her design, and I like conceptually the lore behind fairies in this world, and how differently they perceive life due to the length of their lives, but as a character, she's a miss for me. D tier. Okay, so Grius. The second I met Bro, I knew his ass was dead. This probably isn't great, and emotionally his death didn't really impact me. I felt most for Grius when I got to know his loved ones, Maria and Fabienne, but I'm not sure that feeling for him after his death, and not as a result of anything he said or did, exonerates him into being a great character. D tier for me. Heismay. So Ankh, or low-key adopted Papa, the Yuji whose agility has no equal. As a new parent of a baby boy myself, I relate to this man so much. While I cannot fathom his grief, I can understand how he lost his will to live and continue on for many years. I love how he imparts his wisdom and how much enjoyment he gets from being able to guide you. I also love how he will probe and test you throughout the story just to see what you think is the best course of action, and then offer you almost a devil's advocate response to make sure that you are considering your actions. The way they wrote his interactions with Joanna is some of the best writing from Atlas to date. For me, Heismay is S tier. Goddard, come on man, get this fucking guy out of here. So D. So the only reason I'm saying D tier and not F tier is because his gripes and the way he speaks about younger people is unfortunately realistic and representative of the bitter old men demographic. What am I saying? Bro is F tier, no shot. Hulkenberg. So I think Hulkenberg is amazingly done as a character. Hulkenberg is a Russant and born into an extremely important family, but she wants to carve her own path in life and earn her accolades. I think in life we all know those people who are born with everything and don't have to work for shit and have zero self-awareness of their privilege and like to pretend that they have it the same as everyone else. So honestly, it's cool to see a character who doesn't let her privilege define her and who treats those beneath her with kindness and respect. I like her quirk of liking all types of wild foods because of her years spent traveling looking for the prince, where she'd be scrounging up anything she could to eat. I like her positioning as the big sister, so to speak, for the protagonist, and also Euphausia as well to a lesser degree. I appreciate the lack of romantic undertones between you and her. I think it's good that this game doesn't have every woman throw themselves at you just because you're the protagonist. And I think she was handled brilliantly in the narrative. Oftentimes in RPGs, your first party members can kind of sink into the background and lose their relevance as the story progresses. But in Metaphor, Hulkenberg remains functionally relevant all the way until the end. For example, how she helps Euphausia awaken to her archetype and how she uses her experience to help the party figure out what is happening in the Royal Palace dungeon. For me, definite S tier. Juna, Lady Juna. So Juna is just so fun, honestly. Her charisma and inventiveness means most of her scenes are very interesting. In a game with many great voice lines, she might have the most that you just want to hear over and over. If you've played this game, then you know what I'm talking about. While she doesn't come from the lowest race, she is 1000% exemplary of the rags to riches trope, working her way from a slave to the preeminent songstress in the world. I like that behind all the clout and fame, she's just someone who wants others to have lives full of hope. I also appreciate that she never changed in spite of making it. Of course, her relationship with Rella is central to the narrative as well, which adds a lot to her character. The fact that she was willing to confront her sister and do the right thing along with the group showed again the resilient nature that is central to her character. Juna for me is S tier. Hythlodaeus V. Okay, so I think this character was extremely well done. He's essentially a case study in the transformative power that grief has. Grief brought literally the most powerful man in the world down to his knees and made him into a weak, passive individual who allowed Forden and the Sanctus Church to run rampant. While he may have got the last laugh in the end through his machinations, innumerable people suffered due to his weakness and incapability to conquer his pain. So, in spite of his ideals of utopia, it's hard to see him as a truly great person. A man with a good heart who couldn't survive the horrific ordeals the world put him through. A tier. Captain Klinger. Okay, so I don't know how to feel about him. I can't decide if I like how he was handled or not. It definitely subverted expectations that he died unceremoniously to the human in Joanna's castle. I fully expected to be able to have a second confrontation with him and put him 6 feet under, but at the same time I thought the choice to have him die that way was a cool way of showing how rough the world is and how mortal peril lurks around every corner. Ultimately, I think I do like the way he was handled, but all that said, he's just a grunt, a lackey. There's nothing much to his character, so I'd say D tier. Loveless. Bro, honestly I think this character is ass and represents the missed opportunity that are rival candidates in this game. Too many of them are over the top eccentric and unbelievable in my opinion. I know that people can be very, very, very stupid, but I'd like to believe there's a line, and that line is candidates running on such absurd premises, such as bloodless. Bro wants free alcohol and to turn half the country into an entertainment district, and you're telling me he's making top 10 or 20? I don't know. I just feel like a lot of these candidates were missed opportunities. F tier. Maria. So Maria's cute, and I feel like she represents a lens into how differently children process the systems of the world. You can see in Maria's social link how she's able to sway a boy into treating her kindly instead of with racist disregard, that they are conveying that children are much more malleable and less indoctrinated than adults, and in children, that is where the hope for the future lies. Her story is meant to convey to you that your actions matter, and the youth in the world in particular still have a chance to change and better themselves in how they treat each other. She's well written and important to the narrative. I think personally she's B tier for me. Roger, aka the random dude with the purple hair. So Roger is so fucking irrelevant, bro. Like, he doesn't even have a character portrait, but he's a great example of a candidate in this game running on realistic topics. He talks about abolishing taxes and religion. That's interesting and believable to me. If there was more to him, I could rank him higher, but he's so irrelevant and not super characterized. His policies keep him out of F though. I'd say D tier for Roger. So if you've seen my previous video on this game, you might know where this is going. Listen. Eupha has a very genuine nature. It's showcased through her willingness to be a kind and caring person in spite of the fact that she has no agency or choice in sacrificing herself. She chooses to reframe those horrible circumstances through the lens of love. She loves her people so much that she has no reservations with the self-sacrifice. She instead considers it a blessing to have the power to save others. This is her limitless capacity for love and empathy, her ability to put others before herself. She shows you these qualities in her social link as well, putting everything on the line to help people who find her repulsive. She's an inspiration, my glorious queen. I love her to death. I will not put bias aside, and that's that. The tier above all. Eupha tier. I don't care. Sue me. So Joanna's a really solid, sympathetic villain. Upon first meeting with her, I really didn't suspect her at all, but obviously that suspicion grew over time. What the world put her through was heinous, so honestly it was extremely believable that her mind was warped to the point that she was doing those things with that human. I appreciated that it took a character who went through a similar ordeal to speak some sense into her. I feel like oftentimes the main reason a redemptive villain isn't believable is because the person who talks them down has absolutely nothing in common with them. For example, if you as the protagonist were to talk her down, it would be very power friendshipy and just not believable. But for Heismay to do it, it was instead raw and heart-wrenching. How she willfully marched towards death and placed her trust in you to make a world where no other mother has to go through what she did, that was powerful shit. A tier. The Prince. It took me a long time to decide whether or not I liked what they did with this character. You see, in a vacuum, I loved how they achieved the Chosen One trope while still making your achievements feel earned. The world didn't know you as a prince, they knew you as a nobody from the lowest tribe, and still, you rose to claim your birthright. I absolutely loved that, but at the same time, prior to the reveal, I was really loving the fact that I was a nobody, not a chosen one, just a passionate guy who befriended the prince and was driven to help save his childhood bestie's life, and who really had a powerful moral compass and sense of duty. So it took me a long time to reconcile with the turn the story took. I remember for hours after the prince reveal just going over it in my head again and again. I think ultimately I loved being a nobody more than I did actually being the prince's ideals. But this doesn't diminish my appreciation for how they got away with doing the Chosen One trope for the protagonist in this game. I think it was brilliant writing and I love what they did. I guess I just grew attached to the idea that I was really getting it out the mud and I was just this random dude with passionate ideals rather than basically being the prince himself. I don't know, it was cool to play the game and have the main character or protagonist not even be the main character in the world, if that makes sense. That said, honestly, the prince is S tier in spite of my own personal reservations. A great pro tag with a really cool character design. Milo, no, just no. This guy's the peak of everything I don't like about rival candidates. He suspends belief. You're telling me someone whose whole shtick is establishing a class system where it's based off of beauty made it past 2 rounds? I feel like the majority of people have insecurities about the way they look, ranging from minor to major. So how the fuck did this many people ride for this man? In other words, I feel like most people would assume that they wouldn't rank very highly in Milo's class system. I just don't buy it. I get that he might be solely there for comic relief, but I feel like that could have been achieved without having such absurd candidates be legitimately vying for the throne. F tier. More. So when More says his very last words to you, "Now onward, O king of a new dawn," that shit had me ready to do whatever it took to fix the world. I like that he is the manifestation of the king's ideals in a similar way that for much of your journey, you are that for the prince. I think it's pretty wholesome that in this way, this story allowed the prince to experience this journey with both of his parents' hands on his shoulders, so to speak, pushing him forward from behind. Their love for him was so immense that the dregs of their spirits linger on to guide him on his fated journey, and now that I say this out loud, that really reminds me of Naruto. If you know, you know. But powerful stuff. I also love how at the end, More doesn't just blindly support the prince and say, "You can do anything, son," but rather that like any parent, once he gets fearful for his son's safety, he grabs him, so to speak, and tries to hold on to him. More is somebody who loves so deeply that it irreparably breaks his spirit when those he loves are harmed or under threat of danger. I love that eventually his son, the prince, is able to help More to understand what a true king is in body and soul. More, or Hythlodaeus, was never suited for the task in spite of his ideals, but his son is. In a perfect world, More would probably be the advisor to a king, and he almost plays that to the prince on his journey. Hythlodaeus invoking the royal magic and creating a new system of kings having to earn the throne through public support rather than inheriting it through genetic bloodlines ensures a lower likelihood in the future that someone as unfit as More ever ascends the throne. For me, S tier. More is definitely one of the most morally bankrupt people in this game. Bro is kidnapping innocent people and feeding them to a human to pay off his gambling debts. Not much here, just a shitty dude. I'm thinking D tier. Alonzo. I know this is likely to be a hot take, but for me, this is the worst fucking character in this game. Alonzo sucks. He sucks. My main issue with Alonzo is he's just so over the top. His story reads like a Shakespeare play modernized by Michael Bay. Like, it's the most overdramatic drivel, and drama is fine, but what makes it so intolerable is that you talk to bro for 2 seconds, and then all of a sudden you're his most trusted confidant, privy to his secrets and his most important personal missions. Then, 2 seconds later, you're going to his village and everyone he knows and loves is getting burned alive, including his mother, and then the next time you talk to him, bro literally tries to kill himself, and then at the end of his story, he sets up this whole public execution of himself in this contrived plot to gain you support. And the funniest part is, for most people playing this game, they'll go through the scene when their public support rank can't be raised any further, so after he dies, you'll just see a black screen and your number won't even go up. So it's like, bro did all that shit for nothing. And honestly, I was rolling my eyes during the execution scene because it was just so obvious that he faked his own death. His archetype tree is literally called Faker. Like, come on. So I think Alonzo is the worst because not a single iota of him is believable or relatable or capable of creating any emotional attachment. It just felt like too much too soon, like you had no prior affiliation, and then after one conversation, things kicked off in an insane way. I felt nothing for this person except mild annoyance and disbelief. F tier. Luis. So I reckon this is one of the most enthralling and captivating villains I've encountered in my life of experiencing storytelling. My favorite part of Luis is he abhors lying, and while he might withhold information until it is most advantageous to divulge, he never lies. His backstory, his aura, his character design, all exceptional. I also love how he's handled in the story in a way that his power isn't diminished by the fact that you are the main character. You fight multiple close battles throughout the narrative, and none of your confrontations feel cheap. Each side gets their hits in a way that's very believable. As a villain, you can't ask for much more. S tier. Bardin. You know, I enjoy Bardin. He's a likable dude, and I enjoyed how they used him as a vehicle to convey that being a good person and having the best intentions at heart doesn't automatically make you an effective ruler or leader. I can appreciate his humble nature and willingness to not prejudge others in spite of the fact he's a Rusant military leader. I don't think he's the most layered character in this game, but he's a good one, and I like him a lot. B tier. Catherina. So Catherina is very cool conceptually, in terms of her being a bounty hunting therapist and having a deep desire to make things better for her race in the world. I also thought it didn't feel forced that she showed romantic interest in the protagonist. Catherina's interest makes sense. When you first meet her, you strive to save her friend from mortal peril, and then you clash in a tournament for the throne and she sees the strength in your ideals. I like that she eventually concedes and has the wherewithal to recognize that there is somebody better suited for the task. That speaks to her impressively humble nature, in spite of the hopes of all the Parapists basically being thrust on her shoulders as their famous bounty hunter. I'm thinking A tier. You know, so this has to be one of the most punchable faces that has been put in a video game. A shame you never get to put him in his place, but also quite the subversion of expectations that his embarrassment from Rella led to actual character development. It was quite the jump scare and a good way to see him pop up that scene from his church. It showcased that he was a legitimate believer of the Sanctus Church's ideals and not just a corrupt powermonger. Or rather that he had a fork in his path and he chose to reform himself away from just seeking power. B tier for the warrior monk. Glodell, so this guy has so many unlikable qualities. Good for him. Honestly, how many more could you fit into one character? He's arrogant, he's entitled, he's misogynistic, he's traitorous, he's cowardly, he tries to kill you when your back is turned. If Glodell teaches us anything, it's that even the shittiest person can have their heart stolen by a lovable floof. Shout out to his dog Hector, and shout out to my lovable floof, Birdie. What do you think, Birdie? What do you think? What tier is he in? Birdie says Glodell is B tier for Birdie. Jin. So Jin is a lying snake who perhaps is most reminiscent of real-life politicians, in that he changes what he's running on just to please whoever's listening. I think D tier. He's a slimy dude, but he doesn't have too much going on. Lena. So she's an interesting candidate because she's not in the race for the throne to actually win. She just wants to promote her family's gauntlet runner business. But this issue recurs with the rival candidates. Like, I'm supposed to believe she makes it as far as she does when she's blatantly not even trying to garner support. She's just basically using the political platform to run advertisements. Come on. No. Cool, interesting UG design, but D tier for me. Nurus Unk. Nurus is fucking dope, man. If you're lucky in life, you have an older family member who's capable of regaling you with the most intriguing stories from their life. That's the essence of Nurus. What I like is that you are both able to learn and grow from his recounting of his personal experiences, and I love the weight of his social link and how it examines the question human scientists so often forget to ask themselves across history, the question of whether or not they should do something. Shout out to Oppenheimer. You couldn't ask for a more enigmatic, interesting, scientist-type character, in my opinion. S tier. Rella. So I love Rella's character design, and I love the warm nature she conveys in her scenes. That authentic, earnest personality she projects in spite of her true nature as a magical savant is really personable. I like that with the reveal that she cursed the prince, it didn't turn out her character was a facade or that she was truly evil, but instead it turned out that she herself was a victim of the Sanctus Church as they forced her to curse the prince by threatening her sister Judah's life. She's one of the true heroes in this story if you consider the fact that she so willingly took accountability and laid down her life to lift the prince's curse, and also the countless lives she saved over the years. I don't know, while there wasn't actually too much focus on her throughout the course of the story, which I feel like is a little bit of a miss, I feel like Rella is still S tier for me. Rudolph. So in my estimation, this is the best rival candidate. He's blatantly racist and runs on the idea that the Rusant are superior and everyone should fall in line behind them. He's the most believable rival candidate. You want to believe someone like him would never make top 10, but he represents the darkness in humanity that just can't seem to go away. In real life, we've seen countless racist leaders and bad men win elections. It's only when they're discussed in history books decades later that we say, how could that happen? I like Rudolph in this game because he's a proper villain, and he runs on very believable rhetoric, and his character design is really solid. This is a rival candidate done right. Very believable. A tier for me. Stroll. Man, you want to talk about brotherhood? Stroll might as well be related to you by blood in this game. He's your most ardent supporter in spite of the fact you're an Elden nobody, and he is a noble Clamar. Throughout the story, he leads the group many times in your stead, but it's never in a disrespectful way. It's always in situations where he feels his skill set is what is required. Stroll doesn't want power to be the shot caller, he just wants a better world. His parents instilled great values in him, and I just love that part of him, that he's so obsessed with striving to equal the example his parents set. Any parent would hope for a son like Stroll. One of my favorite Stroll moments from the story was when he called out the king's bullshit when the king was showing the prince's memories in the royal palace dungeon. Number one, because I was thinking the same exact thing as I played, and number two, because it conveyed how healthy his relationship was with his parents, that he so quickly called out that the king was not being the greatest father to the prince by simply showing him these memories. Oh, and he also has 1000% the best archetype awakening scene. S tier, Zorba. So listen, I think Zorba is a great character. He is the definition of a zealot. There are plenty of Zorbas, so to speak, that we see online and in real life that support certain political figures in the same exact way that Zorba does everything and more for Luis. I think for what he is perfectly done. You can't really separate Zorba's character from Luis. In a way, he is Luis's shadow. Zorba's character conveys to you that even the most trusted and valued person by Luis's side, Luis still doesn't hold a deep enough sentiment for them to treat them any differently than a stepping stone to his ideals. Luis basically views people as pieces on a chessboard, and if Zorba's character stood more on his own and was less of solely being a characterizing figure for another major character, then I'd have him higher. But I think B tier is a good place for him. Julian. So Julian is one of the few candidates for the throne who actually runs on a believable belief set, and that is environmentalism. He's smart and insufferably arrogant, and I do like that you can get a book from him for your gauntlet runner. Solid C tier, I think. Gruidae. Old Hermites Gruidae. Plot device. Lore dump machine. Exposition executioner. The elucidation empress. Walking history book. You get my point. This isn't a character, this is a lore dump in human body. But boy, it's good lore. I think D tier. Russell. Russell is a sketchy looking little guy, isn't he? Yeah, there's basically nothing to this character. D tier. So the Senate. We only have the Senate. I'm gonna be straight up with it. They're all going in F. They are all going in F. Honestly, I think I have to put them all in F because they sit around a table for the entire game and do fuck all. They are arguably the biggest missed opportunity in this game's narrative. Well, actually, I think I'd put the Igniter Consortium Director in D tier because he has a really cool character design with the Igniter eyeball, and he's also alluded to in Brigitta's social link. I think Luis to me is probably the best character in this game. As far as Immortals go, all the characters below Eupha tier. He's just so exceptionally done, and he's kind of like the Atlas, so to speak, for this story. Like he's everything kind of, the entire narrative is held on his shoulders. So I think Luis is definitely the top of S tier. I might have been slightly harsh with Gallica just because if their main goal was to just make her this likable, like Navi type presence, where she's not like too center stage, they really succeeded in. So I wouldn't put her in D, I'd put her in C. Russell's a little bit too sketchy looking to be in D tier. Let's put the sketchy little rat down in F tier, huh? Yeah, that looks a lot better. Alonzo's the worst. He's the worst character in this game. I like this tier list a lot because it really highlights how awesome the narrative was. I mean, most of the major characters in this story are at least B tier and above, so I'm happy with how this looks now in the aftermath. Thank you so much for watching. Please comment your thoughts below. I love talking with you guys. That's the main reason I make content, is so we can kind of get a community going and just have talks about video games, because I'm super passionate about it and I love to connect with other people who are also super passionate about it. So yeah, stop by to chat, like and subscribe, and I have more videos on my channel about video games. I have ranking videos and I also have video game essays, so please check those out. I hope you all have a great day, night, or morning, and please remember to be kind and thoughtful. Peace.